about to kick off. There are a number of seats at the front, only 2 are reserved for me and my bag, so please come on down. I'm using the 2 mic setup today because we are of course live streaming with Product Forge, which is awesome. Also means that anything we say or do may well be recorded forever, so no revealing passwords verbally or ideally in any other way. Welcome to Cyber Scotland Connect. This is volume 1, and it's volume 1 with our awesome GIF, which I'm totally not responsible for, I really am not. It's a bit of a relaunch tonight. Obviously this is familiar place, familiar people, familiar organisers with Stu and Skyscanner, but there's a few changes, and these changes we think are really positive. And this is what, we're loosely calling, this is a big meetup. There's a lot of people here. 140 people RSVP'd, another 30 on the waiting list, so it's great to have such a full room. My name's Harry McLaren. I work for a company called ECS Security. We've obviously got Stu here that a lot of you should already be familiar with, who is the co-host and founder of this meetup itself. And what we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk a little bit about Cyber Scotland Connect, just to familiarise you with who we are and what we're trying to do. We've then got 2 phenomenal speakers, and then we're going to finish off with a panel and some questions and answers, hopefully. This is our mission statement within Cyber Scotland Connect. So the idea being it's a community group. We are here for each other, hopefully. It's not anyone's empire to build, not anyone's ego to continually feed. The idea is that people that are willing to stand up and help and moderate and direct are welcome. Those that are here to do maybe just their own power trip are less welcome. And anyone who wants to listen is always welcome, even if you are on your own power trip, that's also fine. So just a few house rules. Judgment free. That goes for both judging speakers and people that are willing to get up and share, but also for one another. This is a safe space, and we want to very much encourage harassment-free events, harassment-free industry. We want people to hopefully like working together and coming together for some beer and pizza without risk, without fear, just relaxing. Sales-free, i.e. You're never going to get a vendor come up here who's just here to sell you a thing. That doesn't mean that individual companies or people that work for companies won't come here, but the idea being that it's all about being a practitioner, being the community, and just sharing something interesting, hopefully. And with that said, please do come forward if you are interested in doing so. You do not have to be a professional speaker. Very few of us are, very much including myself. You just have to be willing to share something, and that can be something that's been interested to you, or just interesting to the industry. We've had people that have talked about their own lab setup that some people might call basic, or, oh, well, that's rudimentary, anyone could do that, but that individual did and they shared it. Awesome. It doesn't have to be next gen. Doesn't have to be, horizon scanning, just willingness to share. That's all we really ask for. And finally, open and honest. If you are going to come up, if you want to talk and share, please do so sincerely. Try not to lie too much. Try not to make up stories. Just be yourself. Share your experience, and I'm sure, hopefully, a lot of people will enjoy what you've got to say. I think we've already mentioned there's no fire alarms planned, so that's really good. A little thank you. So obviously thank you to Skyscanner for hosting us this evening once again. It's phenomenal to be here. This is obviously where Meetup Scotland, Security Scotland started. It's a great venue, and we're really privileged to be here. We've obviously got Product Forge as well over there, who are live streaming this event, which means that all this content's going to be on YouTube forever. But hopefully that'll be a good thing as long as we don't make too many mistakes. So just really thank you for those that support us to, buy the pizza, provide the heating and lighting, and so on. So ever so briefly, I'm just going to give you a little update on Cyber Scotland Connect for those that know who and what it is. Excuse the text-heavy slide, but these are some awesome logos and kind of iconography and stuff that were developed for us by an awesome designer that came forth called Sophie. Details at the bottom. You can find her on both Twitter, LinkedIn, and her website. She's a designer who just offered to give us some of her time, and this is the concept she came up with. The reason that we kind of actually decided to go with, I guess, a brand, so to speak, was something that we could get behind both individually and ideally as a community. It's not to capitalize nor commercialize it. This is not going to suddenly become the latest commercial entity that's trying to sell you next gen whatever. But it is there to hopefully bring us together under some similar values and some people that are really enthusiastic about sharing their time. There's a little narrative about it that I thought was really nice that Sophie wrote. And bear in mind, this is wrote simply based on a few, I guess, interviews and workshops with Stu and myself and Sophie, just to kind of say, well, this is what we think and see. None of this is kind of written in stone, much as it is a shield. There's no carving done. If you disagree, let's have a chat. If you'd like to contribute and add a third or fourth bullet point on, awesome. You know, the whole point here is that we try to do something that's directed by as many people as possible. And right now we've had some awesome people that have come forward. And what they're coming forward to do, ideally, is to try and just increase that collaboration throughout the industry. And that industry, of course, spans many places. So I'm from the private sector, as is Stu, but within our kind of moderations and within this audience, there are people from many different verticals of that industry that relate to cyber or InfoSec. There are people that work in the public sector, within the academic sector underneath. There are those that work to, secure hospitals. There are those that work as vendors to sell to hospitals. Everyone is welcome within this, as long as you, obey the rules around harassment, sales-free zone, etc. But also as long as you're here just trying to push forth something useful and hopefully useful to someone more than yourself. So with that said, these are what we've started referring to as our moderators. There are several of these people already here, if you don't know who they are. In fact, if you're a moderator, could you stand up, please? Sorry, didn't prep anyone, but, tough luck. So these awesome individuals, right? You can. Yeah, Stu's standing up. I'm standing up. Okay, you can sit down. Up, yeah. Thanks, guys. So these people weren't kind of selected in the case of, we went out and did 1,000 interviews. These were people that we're already aware of within the community that we believe had these values to heart, that we had personal connections with, that we could essentially leverage to manipulate them to do what we want. No. That we could hopefully, ask and, somewhat bait and say, look, we're trying to achieve this thing. We think you will be a great force, not only to keep us aligned with these purposes, because Stu and I are only human, we are fallible, we are not perfect, nor do we know everything, and we're just trying to do the right thing. And the more eyes we have on that, and the more ideas we have, the more people driving it, we hope, the better aligned to the needs of the many that this community can grow. This list is not final, nor is it permanent. People will, I'm sure, come and go. The reason that we're not calling this a board or trustees or directors or anything like this is because this isn't to try and force some big hierarchy over said community. This is simply to provide a little structure. And we hope that as we bring in other organizations as partners, as supporters, that it will grow, and therefore, hopefully, so will our understanding of what the community needs. So that's pretty much us. Sorry, me. Over to Stu. Been speaking in third person too many. And I'm going to trade mics now.
I'm going to put my beer down, which is the... Sorry if you're online and you can hear the static of Harry's work jumper.
So careful, So what they don't tell you about being a moderator, that's what you have to do.
Anyway, guys, thank you very much. This has been going for about 3 years, and it's only valuable because of the people who come along. It wouldn't be what it is without any of you in the room. And it's great to see new faces, old faces, as we continue to do these. I think as Harry's kind of described, when you've got a good thing, it's great, but we're the kind of characters that want to make things better all the time and continually improve things. And that was kind of my thought process towards the end of last year about, this is a great thing, but how can we make it better? And I've always been personally uncomfortable with the idea that it's my thing. I think it's a community thing, and how can we kind of drive that? So it's great to have kind of Harry on board, kind of moving that on. And I think what we want out of Cyber Scotland Connect is everybody to get involved in whatever way you want to get involved. If you don't want to get involved, that's perfectly fine. If all you want to do is come along and watch, that's cool. But if you want to contribute and be part of the whole community thing, then please come and do that. That's the premise of what we're trying to do. I don't really want to say too much more than Harry said on that. I did want to touch on a bit on Scott Secure Day 2, which we're doing. So I probably need to put this in my pocket somewhere. Bear with me. So we've been speaking to Digit. I used to pronounce it Digit. I think I've been doing that for years, but it's actually, until you told me it was Digit, I Digit. And what we've got is we've got 6 tracks in Day 2 of Scott Secure, which are a little bit different than has happened at other events in Scotland. And I want to kind of explain a bit about it if you end up going to that event. The mission of that thing is security's hard, and as great as all these kind of things are, where you will hear great speakers with content, there's not so much of a workshopy, collaborative kind of thing going on at some of these events. So the idea is to try and facilitate some of that. We want to try and have people come along to those things at Scott Secure and then leave with really tangible outcomes that not only they can take to their own companies, but that they can kind of open source or share with the communities. Happy to share these slides afterwards, by the way. Oh, what have I killed?
It's down.
Down? Oh, God. Tech these days. So what we're going to do on Day 2 is there's 6 tracks. If you want to just go and see speakers, there is that as well. There's the option to do that. But we're going to run 6 tracks, of which our moderators are helping us moderate, which is awesome. That's what they are, and we'll share those. And this is what it's called a track. I think workshop is probably the best idea. It's not going to be somebody speaking to you for 90 minutes or going through a slide deck and then maybe getting some Q&A. You've got plenty of that. You've got loads of that on Day 1 and then the other sessions or in these kind of environments. The idea is, and whether it's only 3 people around a table or 50 people around a table, is that you all collaborate on that topic. And you talk about the topic, you break off into little, whatever it is that how you want that session to go, which will be moderated by the people that are doing it. You start with a problem statement, and then you try and come to an agreement at the end of those sessions about some things that you can share with people. So let's say that we talk about one of those tracks on cloud security. Okay, what's cloud security risk? Right, it's this. What are some of the mechanisms we can use to address cloud security risk? Okay, it's these things. Right, great, but how can we then share those outcomes with a community or Scotland or whatever it is? That's kind of the bit that's missing for me in Scotland at the moment. It's how do we take all these collective minds in the room, these awesome people who you all work for great organisations doing cool things. How do we then make that available to everybody else? So that's kind of the premise. It's a little bit different. If you're somebody who just wants to go and see a speaker, fine. Go. There's that there at that event, but it requires people to be open, honest, collaborative. Speak up, tell us what you've learned, tell us what you know, and we can then use that and drive information from it. So some of the outcomes you might end up with at these things, and it can be anything. This is not a defined process. You could have playbooks or blog pieces or articles or code. I mean, who knows what level it might go into. The idea is a tangible outcome at the end of it, where maybe it's a PR piece by Digit, maybe it's the GitHub thing that we've got going on. Let's actually release that stuff and say, for that session, we had 20 people from some of the best organisations in the UK came together and talked about a topic and then produced these outcomes. How cool is that? Because nobody's doing that at the moment. There's nobody doing that really in the UK, let alone in Scotland. So that's kind of the idea behind it. I'm going to try and push this out online over the next week or two about how cool this could be. Some of it may work, some of it may not. It's a bit of a trial. Let's see how it goes. On that note, we're going to go over to our speakers. Thank you as always from me personally to Skyscanner and the hosts, all the people that help these events, to all of you that come along, the speakers, because without them these things don't happen, to Harry for helping these events now go to a different level. It's all very professional now, isn't it? Got a logo and everything. So can I hand over to Ian Murphy, who's travelled up to speak to us tonight. Thank you very much.
Good evening. How are we? My name is Ian Murphy. I'm going to talk to you about what I consider fundamental truths, and more fundamental truths on what we need to think about when we're trying to go after the advanced attacker on the network, or what companies or organisations do fundamentally wrong when they think they can build a SOC or go into managed services. So a little bit about me. I've been in it's all about me. I was just thinking, you said no sales and no telling lies. So I've got about 20 seconds of presentation to go through. So I am from Liverpool. Don't worry, all your valuables are safe. It's okay. See people mentally patting themselves down, just checking the car and things like that. No, you're okay. So I've been in security since about 92, and it started here. It started here in Edinburgh, actually. I came to work for the Ministry of Defence over in Rosyth Dockyard, so I came to live up here for a year, so it's great being back here. And ever since then, I've kind of been fortunate enough to be in security. And I say that because fortunate, it's a great industry to be in, right? If anybody's getting into this industry as a new entrant, it's a brilliant industry to be in. Unfortunate because it gives you a really unhealthy paranoia about how you look at the rest of your life. Everything is a risk to you, right? You're looking at the upside for other people who are trying to scam you potentially, you know. And also as well, you become the de facto person for the rest of your family for any IT problem that you will ever have in the future. So, and all the viruses are your fault as well. So, a little bit of background about me. Yes, those are two pictures of me. I wasn't always a security geek. Maybe like a lot of kids, wanted to be a professional footballer. So that is me in the blue, by the way. That was taken in 2000 at Wembley. I managed to achieve my dream and play at Wembley in 2000. In the FA Vars final, mostly semi-pro. I did play a bit up here in junior football in the Fife League. When I came up in 92, that is potentially the hardest football I've ever played in my life. Not just the weather, but the people you play against. It makes you grow up overnight into a man. And I've still got scars on my head from it as well. If maybe some of the older football fans, if there are no Jim Leishman, I used to play for Jim Leishman and stuff like that. So, now I looked at you two guys and I didn't want to cast aspersions that you were the two oldest looking guys in the room. It's the grey hair that drew me, right? And the other thing, the grainy photo here is me with Newcastle's finest, Anton Deck, which was a programme about 6 or 7 years ago called Red or Black. And the premise of the programme was there was a bunch of different stupid tasks. You got to the end and you had one choice, red or black, for £1 million. Guess which I chose and guess what I didn't get. My boy got to meet One Direction backstage, so, you know, every cloud and all that for him, not for me. Don't speak to him now, really. So I'm going to start off with 3 fundamental truths, and then I'm going to go into the kind of meat of it, which is talking about security operations. I have a long background in security operations, probably since about 99. So I've seen a lot of change, but I've seen a lot stay constant over that. The only judgment I will ever give, you said to be non-judgmental. A, if you're a United supporter, you'll get a judgment off that. And B, if you tell me your product's got AI or ML in it, right? I will want you to explain it to me, and I will want you to prove it to me how it's better than just the normal product you had 6 months ago, which didn't catch the same alert back then, right? If you do see me on LinkedIn, I will normally be ranting about that stuff. That's all I do. I sit in a room every day just shouting at people who come at me with machine learning or artificial intelligence. So the first one I'd like to offer up is you're going to be breached. I think we should all in the industry accept that. We should, either through our experience or through what's out there at the moment, or even the big attacks that are happening. Look at Citrix. How much money do you think Citrix spend on security? And even with that, you've got to assume, if you're going to take an attacker's view to it, you've got to assume you're going to be breached. And this largely comes from the fortress mentality that security was developed around. The inner squishy bit that you were trying to protect with deeper walls, higher turrets, deeper moats, sharks in the moats, all that kind of thing. It doesn't work anymore. And I think anybody who's under an illusion that it does work, you have to think about it, you know, when you're building bigger defences like that, your enemies learn to fly, or they've found something to dig underneath, or they've got somebody inside your castle already. So as an analogy, you have to think of that. Human factor's the weakest link. I think Mitnick said there's no patch for stupidity. It's really true. You know, it doesn't matter how many times I tell my dad not to click on stuff, he still clicks on it. And if you ever want to be scarred for life, you go through your parents' internet history, right? Losing $1 million was a walk in the park to that. It really was. But we have to accept that we will always make mistakes. It's a double-edged sword. I'll talk about experts a little bit later on. But you've got to accept that. We don't mean to, but we do. And most organisations don't look at security holistically. If we go back, it was about technology. Put the technology in, firewall, antivirus, then IDS. Then Gartner says IDS is dead, so the IDS trade changes the D to a P, and overnight it becomes prevention instead of detection. These are the types of things that we do in the industry that doesn't really serve us too well. And from a holistic point of view, most people are, yeah, I've spent what on it, and what are you doing? And what I actually do is I use what I call a coverage model to explain this to customers. It's a simple 3x3 matrix. I like to keep things simple. I'm quite a simple person, as you've already guessed. And across the top, you've got preventative techniques, detection techniques, and responsive techniques. And then down the side, you've got administrative type controls, technical type controls, and procedural and process-based type controls. And then if I just fill these in with a couple of examples, what I mean by holistic controls is the combination of all of these. And obviously, this is not an exhaustive list. If only it were, we'd all be fine, and we'd just be eating pizza and getting drunk if that was the case, which is not a bad idea, right? But when I talk to customers about holistic, I'm talking to them about the entirety of this. But actually, they then take that away and think they're going to solve a problem, or they're going to solve risk with technology only. So it leads them, which is into the main meat of what I want to talk to about, of doing this type of thing, is customers and companies are really bad at building SOCs. As I say, my background is in SOCs heavily since about '99. I know there's a couple of guys here from MSSPs as well. But a company, I find normally when they want to build a SOC, is generally down to a vanity project. It's down to somebody who thinks that they're going to build the best SOC in the world and get the best people in the world and have the best technology in the world, and they're going to magically try and stop attacks from that point of view. You know, the reality of it is doing this stuff is hard. It really is hard. Trying to go after the unknown is really difficult. Trying to keep out the basics is bad enough. And buying a SIEM and getting new people from university with a computer security degree. Now, I'm looking at you guys now because you're the youngest looking. It kind of gets a little bit older as you go further back. But not you, though. So I'm already endearing myself to people, aren't I? I'm sorry about that. But generally, you two and you lot there. You can't stick them on a seat and call them an analyst and think you've got a SOC because you've then got a SIEM at the back of it. You know, I was working, a lot of my experience has been in government and in industry as well. 10 years or so with the Ministry of Defence and a few other places, and a lot of time in industry and a lot of time doing contracting as well, security architecture and all that type of stuff. And I was recently at a product day, a vendor's day for a big government department, one of the biggest. And they were actually trying to let a contract for a SOC capability for themselves for 9 million over 5 years-ish, something like that, that they could buy off the shelf from somebody like, I know he's here at the back, SecureWorks or something like that, for a fraction of that cost. And I'm thinking to myself, what's the point of trying to do that to maintain parity when you've got SecureWorks, you've got Symantec, you've got IBM, you've got Secure Data, you've got a bunch of other people, Verizon and all those guys. What's the point of doing that to maintain parity? Yeah, people want to do it, right? And I can only put it down to vanity, because I'll tell you now, their security is no different than everybody else's security. People get in the same way. People get in through faults, misconfigurations, people doing stupid stuff, clicking on links. They will get in the same way. Attackers are not that fussy of how they get into organizations. They'll come in the same way. So the security approach is not any more special in government than it is in industry. So sometimes how I try and explain this as well, I'm just going to have a little drink. Is that allowed on YouTube, to be drinking on YouTube? Is that drink responsibly, folks? I haven't swore yet, which is a bonus. We're moving on. So I talk about the sliding scale of maturity for organisations. So in the very beginning, most organisations will start off here with an architecture. If they're pretty good and forward thinking, they use stuff like Sabsa and mix it with TOGAF and Zachman and all of those good things. Then they may move on in a maturity to a passive defence approach, you know, where they may be adding more systems to it that can provide a defence in depth approach, that they've got more availability through that they may have somebody looking at some of that info or maybe even acting on that info, to then going into active defence. And this is where the SOC or the MSSPs start to come into play. This is their usefulness here, right? Where they've got threat analysts and trained people. Another thing I should have mentioned, by the way, for you guys, the new guys' entrance into, if you do get, yes, yeah, I'll take that nod from you as well. We both know that's not right. But for you guys, if you get a job in a SOC, take the 2 years training, move on somewhere else. Take it for what it is. Use the security industry to further your career, okay? It's important that you get that type of experience. So back to the active defence, where you'll be doing some monitoring. You'll still be looking at logs, you'll still be dependent upon what that tool is that's telling you, whether it's Splunk, whether it's QRadar, whether it's ArcSight, whatever it may be. You're still acting on that output, but you're getting more of an active defence. And then you're increasingly seeing more and more MSSPs add intelligence to it. So intelligence, not just about the organisation, but about externally, who's interested in it, what the chatter is on the dark web, where they're coming from. There's plenty of those feeds out there, and the MSSP industry is starting to build them in. And then finally moving to an offensive approach. You can't see that, Harry, apologies. Where you're actually looking at specific type of countermeasures legally, or going after them. You know, going after the attackers. I wrote an article on LinkedIn just recently, the best form of a defence is attack. Most of my articles are football related. You know, you can take the boy out to Liverpool and all that. But it's what I understand, it's how I rationalise these type of things. And actually, when you get to this level of maturity, you could probably be safe in the knowledge that you are getting some good value out of your SOC that you may still persist with in building, which will cost a lot of money and a lot of resource, or the MSSP that you're dealing with as well. Another way to look at it is that we must evolve in security. So traditionally, MSSPs, security operations centres, are kind of stuck somewhere here between detection and response, and have been for 20 years or so. You know, the message hasn't changed from MSSPs. I'll find a needle in a haystack. I've got a slide later on that. That's the same message, and it's about numbers. I've seen a post on Twitter, I think earlier today, that said Splunk. I've got no affiliation with Splunk, by the way. Splunk for WorldPay takes 6 terabytes of data and 25,000 devices. What's the point of that if it's not efficient in catching the people on the endpoints who are doing bad stuff? So that may wow in a sales presentation, and we used to do it at Symantec. We used to show the funnel, and we'd talk about the amount of logs we bring in, the amount of events it would generate, the amount of incidents, and then the amount of things you have to do from a customer perspective. It is pretty pointless putting those numbers up without any context in it. I did say before, you knew humans are the weakest link, but you also need a human to catch a human. So this is where I will go into bat with anybody who talks about deep learning and deep mind or Megamind or whatever it's called with AI and ML. Because actually, there's certain things when you're sitting there that only pop up and only recognise today. Obviously, things move on in the future, and people may look at this YouTube video in a couple of years, or maybe two days from now, and say he doesn't know what he's talking about. They'd be mostly right, to be quite honest. But you do need experts in the field. You need somebody who can rationalise. You know, I think even Amazon at the moment, where they use AI to weed out false reviews on their website, that still gets it wrong, right? It still does get it wrong. So you need somebody who can make sense of that, who can look at something and go, oh, again, for the students, if you haven't read it, Cuckoo's Egg, Clifford Stoll, great book on security. Talks about a university administrator who notices an error in computing time back in the late 80s. He investigates it. I'm not going to give a spoiler away, but he catches the bad guy in the end, right? So that's not really the point of the story, but it's the idea of a human doing some investigation on what might have not been anomalous enough to get an algorithm interested. You also need experts. Now, most SOCs, I've alluded to this earlier on, most SOCs have first, second, third line type analysts or engineers with the experience moving further backwards. So the third line guys are usually the most experienced, the first line guys are the new ones into the industry. But you really want to be investing in experts or turning your people into experts in certain areas, whether it's threat detection, threat response, malware reverse engineering, intelligence guys who know what they're doing, know what they're looking at, and also who are able, even with that experience, to say, I got that a bit wrong, you know. Stu talked about the community earlier on. It's really great to hear, because I can pontificate, and all other speakers can pontificate, but only really starts working when you start exchanging ideas and saying, you said that, well, what does that mean about it? Why did you say that? Where's that coming from? You may uncover that you've called somebody out on something that they've got nothing to back it up, or you may find out that the reason behind that is X, Y, and Z. You may actually learn something, or we learned something from you guys. We go, no, that's not my experience. Here's how I've seen it. Here's what's happened. I talk about the needle in a haystack quite a bit. This is a sales process or a sales technique that hasn't changed for 20 years. I punted it back in the early 2000s when working at Symantec. It doesn't really work. It's great. It sounds brilliant. It sounds as if you're taking a heavy workload off people. But actually, attackers know this stuff, right? They know this. They hide in the white noise. They know exactly how to evade all the controls. You only have to go and listen to some of the chatter on the dark web to understand that. They know this as well as you know it, but you don't want to yet admit it to yourselves that actually a logs approach works. You know, if a logs approach works, Equifax wouldn't have got done, Target wouldn't have got done, Citrix wouldn't have got done, Sony wouldn't have got done, because they were all looking in the logs. And if you keep constantly focusing in one area, something else is going on in the background that you're not really seeing. That's not to say the answer isn't in the logs, by the way. When you go back and do retrospection, or you start doing threat hunting or all that type of good stuff, you can find that information. But actually, if you've got a gazillion logs and you're trying to look for the one thing in it and trying to only focus on that one thing, you've got less chance of seeing it. Also, breach validation is missing. So what do I mean about breach validation? Well, more often than not, you will get an alert if you run a SOC or you're a customer of a SOC or an MSSP, you'll get an alert that says, hey, go and check this. And more often than not, it's a false positive. It's one of the things that blights our industry, is the alert fatigue approach. And you become immune to all that stuff eventually. You know, you start turning off those alerts because it's too much noise. It's the thing that leads us to tune out IDSs because they're too noisy. You know, it's the thing that leads us to ignore the SIEM alerts because they're a little bit too noisy. So what we need is a way of post-breach analysis of the malware that's there and the human attacker. And we need to think about that in the industry and how we go after that and how we look at the telltale techniques And you can only really base that on intelligence you're gathering about what they do. Mitre Attack is a great source here. So if you haven't been there, I'm guessing a lot of the more experienced guys have. mitreattack.org. It's a framework for detecting advanced types of attacks. It's really, really complex. They've just done an eval as well, where they evaluate certain products based on these APTs, and it made my heart sink when I saw several of the vendors who were involved in this eval try and use it to their aim to try and sell and punt their products. It's not the point of Mitre Attack. The point is to inform people about what the right approach for the right situation is. That could be a combination of products. Unusually enough for me, I called a couple of those guys out on LinkedIn as well. What are you going to do? In my opinion, SEAM is overpriced and overrated. I think you can see that. It's a background of Kim Kardashian. So there's an analogy I normally draw of when you've got a really noisy SEAM and you don't have people who know what they're doing around it, it's like having a selfie-obsessed celebrity. They're just taking pictures and posting it all the time and nobody really cares. And that's what happens with SEAMs. You know, you spend all this money, somebody sold you a bunch of magic beans, and then the magic didn't happen. What happened there? The salesman's off on his yacht somewhere in Monaco or getting a top salesman's award and going to Cabo and stuff like that. And you guys are sat there going, well, it's not doing what he said it'd do, you know, because they don't take you on that journey. They don't, you know, and it's our fault as well, by the way. We should start asking them these difficult questions. We should stop believing and drinking the Kool-Aid. You know, we should start pinning them to the floor. And we should recognise a used car salesman when we see them as well. They usually start off with mate. Right, mate? How are you? I'd like to say I wasn't one. No, I don't think so. I sell cars that have been cut in half and welded together. Cut and shut type things. So the SEAM challenge and why it's difficult is the volume of alerts, thousands and thousands of alerts, daily, hourly. And because breach validation's missing, and unless you've got an army of people, there's really no way to confirm that. You know, I worked at a company where I would regularly get alerts from their SOC, their multi-award winning SOC, that would tell me that I was under attack because there was 5 failed logins from internal IP addresses. You know, if it was once and I told them, no, look, the admin's just set up a ping there just to make sure the box is up and running, that would be fine. But every single week when they're doing that type of stuff, we need more value out of that. We need more value out of the money, the expense of the well-earned money we pay for people to secure it. I think I've banged on about this. Is anybody in any doubt that I don't think a logs-only approach works? No? You know, and when you think about it, when you think about it from security, generally how we did this stuff was we relied on firewall and IDS and maybe some AV, and I know we've added more stuff to it. But if we take a firewall log, what's it telling you? Good or bad? It passed, it didn't pass. And then the IDS is telling you, well, I've seen something that matches a signature set. Well, there's already a flaw in that there. If there's no signature for it, it's not going to catch you. And then it's the SEAM's job to correlate those together, which is just an SQL expression, right? Have you seen this? Have you done that? Yeah, bing. That's red. That's red in our opinion. So go and do something with it. It's missing a lot. You're missing a lot by just taking that approach. And I'm not saying SOCs haven't moved on and improved, but when you want to build your own SOC, linking back to the earlier bit around it being a vanity project, it's a long way to go to get up to what the big boys do and how they do it. Some stats, these are our stats, by the way, they're not anybody else's. Talking to customers, talking to security managers, CISOs and all that kind of jazz globally. 1% of the incidents that they said they uncovered came directly from a log, came directly from something that was alerted and then they did something about it. Bless you. So when you look at it from that point of view, you think there's got to be something else that we can do. you know, because there's blind spots in the threat detection side of things. Again, our stats only, nobody else's. 24% say they have visibility into attacks. Taxi visibility into attacks. It's less than a quarter, you know. 8% they can quickly detect it. Now, since we looked at this stuff, MITRE ATT&CK has come out with the eval of products and stuff like that. So there's more stuff out there that you can go and look at the product that you may want to buy or not to see whether it's efficient or not in catching attacks. You know, and 11% can quickly investigate attacks. The post-breach analysis of stuff. It was malware, it's crypto mining stuff. It's, you know, there's a human attacker moving east to west. How do you spot that type of stuff, you know? You won't do it with DLP, you won't do it with IDS, and you won't do it by collecting all of those logs, throwing it in a big data lake. I think that's the big thing now, data lake. You won't do it by throwing it all in there and imagining that some magic will happen in between. And really what we are doing in the industry, and I know in sales that we're partly to blame for this stuff, is we're just throwing good money after bad, we're burning it. There's an economic effect, I think it's called the Veblen effect or the Veblen effect, which means if something is expensive, it must be good, right? You know, we all do it with the clothes or the watches or whatever we may buy or the cars we may drive. It's expensive, it must be good. It's not always the case, right? We have to get over that stuff. We have to start asking difficult questions of people. Always have an inquiring mind in security. Always don't be afraid to ask the question. What do you mean about that? Why is that the case? You know? And when we talk about budgets, currently where we are at the moment is a heavy spend on prevention. Not a lot of spend on monitoring, very little on response, on the response capabilities to go after the bad things that may be happening, that are happening on your network. And what Gartner and most of the analysts say is we need an equal split on that. A third on each of them, really. We need to start evening out this playing field. Some Gartner analysis stuff. You can have a read of this. You're going to send the presentation out, yeah. So you can have a read of this stuff, no problem. But you know, I do like the sound of my own voice sometimes. But Gartner and IDC and all those guys say similar stuff as well. A few other quotes, and that's me. Any questions? Any comments? Any thoughts? You're quite willing to call bullshit if you want. Oh shit, I fucking swore. Right, sorry. Said I wasn't going to.
That's all. The only reason I put my hand up is to get this back. Of the other 99% of things that didn't come directly from logs, what was the split of sources for those detections?
So there's a bunch of different stats out there. I think FireEye quote 110 days or so dwell time on stuff. Gartner quote 246 days, and most of the more often than not, the detection of that stuff is via external third parties. So whether it's Chatter on the deep and dark web, Citrix came from Chatter on the deep and dark web, right? RE Security, I think they're called, based in LA. They told Citrix about it, Citrix ignored it, they told the FBI about it, the FBI kind of ignored it, they told the FBI again, the FBI told Citrix. Then, you know, it becomes more interesting when the FBI say it, because who are these small consultants in? They probably think they're punting them for more work, to be quite honest, you know. So more often than not, it comes from outside the organisation when those detections happen. But the real sad thing about this is these detections go undetected. And the only time, which brings me back to my first point around, you have to accept you're breached. And if you're not, you're going to get breached. And you're probably not breached because you don't have a web presence, you're not on the internet, you're a fish and chip shop, probably. Not just fish and chip shops, greengrocers maybe and stuff. There's other retail outlets. Sure.
Can you, for the YouTube, can you repeat the question when it gets...
Of course.
So you mentioned about fortresses and attacking and that, but surely we're making lives of attackers really easy now when we put in the databases wide open on the internet, where there's unauthenticated access to all your data, and at the end of the day, data's most of the time what the attackers are after anyway.
Yeah, So just for the YouTube side of things, Sean mentioned around not only are there issues with fortress mentalities, but also there's issues with, correct me if I'm wrong here, by the way, with putting our data out in the cloud, on the online world, in databases that aren't secured correctly, aren't configured correctly, are open to everybody, have guest passwords on there, all the type of stuff we did in a fortress mentality we're now doing in the online world. Have I represented that roughly-ish? Yeah, okay, good. I'll refer you back to my second slide. People are idiots. You know, I think the greatest source of attack from a cloud environment, I'm reverberating, from a cloud environment is misconfiguration, right? It's generally not the cloud providers themselves, although I have a deep heart of paranoia about them. I'm not so sure they're all so squeaky clean, right? This trust me, I've got this. No, I'm not going to do that. That's the unhealthy paranoia, by the way, in security. Go on, Stu.
I say we can't be friends anymore, Ian.
And there I was holding off on the height joke before. I held off on it. You've changed. So yes, you're right. Those things still exist, and fortresses help some of that stuff, but it also gave us a false sense of security. But I think also as people run to consume cloud, which is a great, don't get me wrong, it's a great idea, I get it, right? But as they run to consume cloud, get an adult in the room when you're doing it, right? Ask a security guy, get them involved. Don't do it on your own. And then, because I generally find that we are the last person they come to talk to on a project, but we're the first person they seek out when the shit hits the fan. I've done it twice. And you're getting away lightly if I've only sworn twice. Oh, is it? I've got something to live up to then. Any other questions, comments, disagreements? Yes. Just one behind you, and then you after that. There's a chap behind you.
I wanted to ask your opinion about how you see company maturities in getting into agile service delivery. Basically, from your comments about how mature they are at getting to cloud.
So, do you mean agile as a methodology, or are you talking about stuff like Lambda and things like that as functions of code and?
Both, I would suspect.
Okay.
Both in terms of how they are mature as an organisation in terms of what the security of that is, but also how well they understand functions like Lambda that they're making.
Okay. Not very. So the question, sorry for YouTube, I nearly forgot that, is how do I perceive organisations are when they're entering things like agile service delivery and maybe even the more advanced stuff as function as a service like Lambda and things like that. Yeah, ish. We keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again. Agile is just another way of doing project management and delivery, right? We're not reinventing the wheel here. We're not splitting atoms. You know, cloud is mainframe on a grander scale, right? It really is. Nothing new comes out of our industry. It just keeps going round and round and round, and we keep making the same mistakes and mistakes and mistakes. But the good news, folks, it keeps us in business. Is that the wrong message for YouTube? Maybe. Maybe. No, we should be more responsible. And we really should. Communities like this are important. You know, communities like CSC, you do realise you've called yourselves CSC, don't you? Yeah, good. I like the shield, by the way. I do like the shield. One of the company, Symantec, who I worked for, bought a company called Riptech, who were an MSSP back in the day, and their correlation engine, before there was anything SIEM-like, was called Calterium, which was Welsh for shield. There you go. Totally useless information, but if you're ever on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and they ask, what's the Welsh for shield? Now you know what it is. Thank you very much. I'm on 10%. Sorry, another question down here, Stu?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
My voice is usually loud enough without anyways. I work at a large financial organisation, sort of having a love-hate relationship with MSSPs and outsourced SOC. We spend about $1.5 million a year, $2
2 million a year. And basically, we started off with internal scenes many years ago, went to outsource, went back to scene, back to scene.
Yep.
As each different manager comes on.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of snake oil in the industry.
Yes.
We've done large pen testing attacks and various
Red teams,
and so on,
gone unnoticed.
and go completely unnoticed.
Feel your pain, brother.
So you said in your deck was it was a really good presentation, I really liked it, but you didn't offer much of a solution. So you say actually large companies probably best not doing this yourself. And I'm saying, yeah, been through that. Went to the professional, large names, big brand names, millions of pounds a year. It's actually no better.
So I think trying to sum that up is somebody who has used MSSPs, who's tried to do it in-house, tried to use MSSPs, still don't see the value in either approach, and I didn't offer up any answers. Great consultancy approach, that, right? Hey, I may look stupid. So the only reason I didn't offer any suggestions was because it would take me into the salesy route, right? But actually, the promised land, if you will, and I say that really carefully because there's always a promised land in security, there's always a silver bullet, there's always a next thing. But actually, the iteration that Gartner and those people talk about is managed detection and response, right? Different types of techniques to go after the unknown, to spot the red teamers on your network who are wandering about banging bin lids and the MSSP still not seeing them, right? We see it every day. We see that type of stuff every day. So there are answers out there. I would say do some research around MDR and what MDR, the promise of what MDR can provide, and then do some proper use case analysis on them. Don't listen to the sales guy. Don't listen to them. Do some proper use case, get them in. If they're an MDR worth the salt, they'll do a free proof of concept for you. If you're a big enough bank spending that kind of money, they'll do it for 2 or 3 months for you. So don't do a 14-day type of trial and put them through the paces, throw APTs at them, get your red team in there, see which is effective. Don't do it through an RFI though, because an RFI generally drives the price down for everybody and you get the cheapest, least effective product or service that ticks 80% of the stuff. We harm ourselves with that. Build some trust relationships with people who know what they're talking about and ask them difficult questions. Does that make sense? Any other questions? At the back, Stu, we used to call this doggies in football training, where you just be shuttling between one and another. Okay, 2 questions. I thought we only said 1 question. Right, 2 questions. First one, I talk about logs only. If it's not logs only, what else? Second one, what about zero trust? Zero trust is not new, right? Least privilege, all of that stuff has been around since about 2010. It's just that we have a fancy new cool name for it. It sounds great. Zero trust? Yeah, brilliant. I've not been trusting anybody in security for the past 25 years. Logs only. I'm not saying the answer isn't in the logs. I'm saying to get to the answer in the logs and trust only on that is a difficult place to be. It's really difficult. You need to be skilled to do it. However, threat hunting offers some new promise. Some of the more advanced detection techniques, tying in your DLP as well with that. Looking at deception type techniques, having really good intel. All of these create and colour that picture a little bit more. I'm going to talk about threat hunting as well. By the way, most of the detections in threat hunting can be done with the metadata. Not the full packet. You can do a lot with the metadata that should be within that packet roaming around your network. And get some good threat hunters in as well if you're going to do this. Don't do what most people do is they go and get Bro or something like that, and then they get somebody in. That's your job for next year. You need to be the threat hunter. You need to be the expert. Go and pay the money to get an expert. Get somebody in who knows what they're doing. It might look a bit costly to begin with. It'll short circuit and stop a lot of pain in the future. Any other questions? Comments, disagreements? Do you want to hear more about football stories? I've got a couple. No? We good?
Can we have a round of applause for you?
Thank you.
Sorry, we changed over mics. Because I forgot to mention, because I'm rubbish at this. Slido.com, slido.com, and then use the code CSC1, and you can ask questions via that. Please don't know what happened at the last one. I got a whole load of spurious nonsense. But it's there if you want to be anonymous, so you don't want to stand up and talk. So thank you, Ian. That was brilliant. Now we've got Maggie from EasyJet. Maggie relocated back to Edinburgh, what, a year ago or so? Yeah, and now is becoming a really important part of our community, really forward-thinking, and great to have her involved.
You said Denmark, right?
Cool, over to Maggie.
So this is my catchy title for tonight's talk, 7 Habits of Highly Effective New Starters. So this is all personal. I am qualified to talk to you about this today because I've had about 4 jobs in the last 5 years. That in itself is a talk for a completely different day. So the idea of tonight is if you're about to start your first job in the industry or about to start a new job, congratulations. Or really if you think nothing's working, I'm a bit annoyed with what's going on in my company, no one's listening to me, maybe take a couple of these tips and, turn over a new leaf, start fresh on Monday, see how that goes for you. A little bit about me. I am all of these things. I work in information security. I have a degree in accounting. I've never worked as an accountant ever before in my life, so please don't ever let me loose on the books. And I'm also a dancer. I've done different security things, GRC mainly, and also of about 24 weeks ago, which is roughly about 6 months, I am a mother. I'm still surprised about that. Thank you. You can follow me on the Twitters or on LinkedIn. If you do connect with me on LinkedIn, please just add a note to say, meet up. Otherwise, it helps me weed out the spammers, and plus it makes me remember who you are. Right, so this is kind of what I'm going to talk to you about today. So I'll just dive right in. So the first thing you need to do when you start a new job, and I have to say this talk kind of works for, I've worked in companies where I was the only security person. So it's either a new function or it's just kind of a small place and they're not really into security yet. And I've also worked as part of kind of a larger team. This kind of stuff works all the time. When you first get there, introduce yourself. Tell them who you are. So I normally go with Maggie, as you've seen me introduce myself. My surname is Diarher. No one can pronounce that, so I normally just say, it's kind of like Madonna or Prince. Just stick with Maggie. It's fine. I'm happy with that. It helps to have something memorable. It means you don't have to reintroduce yourself every 2 weeks when you speak to the same people all of the time. So, if you have to, change your name. That's a good story to tell. English is also my second language. I had to write a test to prove that I could speak English before I got to this country. I'm South African, if you can't tell from the accent. So I do have a certificate to prove that I can speak English if anybody wants to see it. So go around and introduce yourself to people. Talk to them, tell them who you are. Don't tell them what you're going to do yet. I would suggest just speak to people. Go to their meetups, go to their team meetings. I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later as well. But it's really important just so people know who you are. People in the industry who've worked a bit longer, Ian mentioned it a bit earlier as well, they're the last people who normally come and talk to you. But if they know your name, if they remember you, then that helps. I'm also, when I started on my team, I was the only woman there, which is great because they normally kind of go to the security area and they go, oh, you must be Maggie. I'm like, yeah, it's the one with the long hair. Now we're way more, so that doesn't work for me anymore. The second thing you need to do after you've introduced yourself and everybody knows who you are is find the business objective. I cannot stress this enough. Figure out what it is the company you're working for actually does. Because it's probably not going to be security, right? What is it that the company does? Do they sell stuff? Do they fly planes? In my case, I work for EasyJet. We basically do two things. We make our money by selling tickets, so it's very important for us to sell tickets. Our website goes down for an hour, we lose millions. Website does not go down ever, right? Very, very important. The second thing we need to do is we need to fly people who bought the tickets, right? We need to get them to their destinations. You all know if you don't get to your destination, you get there 10 minutes late, that's a problem. No one really mentions when you get there 10 minutes early, but I know that doesn't really happen. So it's really important to find that business objective. You have to understand that security is normally a part of the cogs in the machine, and your cog might be making thunder, and it might be really awesome at making thunder. But if the machine is selling rainbows, no one really cares about the thunder. And you absolutely need to remember that. It's really very important to figure out what the business objective is and how security actually supports that. A lot of insecurity thinks we're very smart, and we really are. But the key is, when you introduce yourself, is to not let that show yet. So figure out what the business objective is. The next thing is culture. So this is also very important. As you go around figuring out what your business does, what is it that is the culture of the company? Are they very process driven? So, if you want to have something in a change, you need to fill in a change control form, which is signed off by 7 different people, reviewed 2 weeks before the time. Or is it more built on relationships? You can kind of speak to this guy, speak to that guy, who'll get you in the process. You have to figure out, who do you really report to? A lot of companies, it's very easy. You've got your little hierarchical plan, and you report to this guy, you report to that guy, reports to the next guy. You might have a security authority separately, or an audit committee or something that you report to, and that sometimes is very clear on paper, but in practice that doesn't happen. A lot of the time in security, especially when you're a very small team, you actually can't do much on your own. You want to implement a SIEM, you want to implement something, you need the network team, you need the engineers, you need finance to sign off on purchase orders. You need loads of other people to be involved. So you need to figure out who those people are and go and introduce yourself and help them understand that you understand the business. I think I've lost the battery on this now. Oh, it still works. The next point is easy wins, right? So this is my cliche point, whichever cliche you can throw at this. The easy wins, don't rock the boat, this is the best one, high yield opportunity. That's a nice one, isn't it? The low-hanging fruit, we've all heard those. Yes, I know. It's awful, but it works. So I'm going to say there's two ways to go about this. When you're new and you're working in a big team and you're kind of really junior, please don't go with the first of all, this is a bonus tip for you. When you're going in for an interview, don't hack the company before you go, honestly. No, seriously, don't do that. There's maybe you maybe read one story about a guy who did that and then turned into the next CIO. You haven't heard about the 99 others where all of us hiring managers are going, oh, you won't believe what just happened. It comes back to, you might have seen a vulnerability, but you don't understand the business. You don't know where they are on the journey. So it's really arrogant of you to go and say, you should have done this last week, when you don't really know what's going on and what their challenges are. So when you're in a big team, you're kind of junior, you want to find something to show that I've actually done something, right? And that's where the low-hanging fruit, the easy wins, works well. Also, if you're like the only security person, you want to show people that security is doing something, you want to find 1 or 2 things that actually makes a difference in kind of a month or 2. You don't want to get there and go, yeah, I'm brand new and we've got this great journey and in 18 months' time, I'm going to show you some results. People are going to forget about you by then. So there is some merit in it, just to start out with. Relationships matter. Now, I've been banging on about this. After you've introduced yourself, people know who you are, you understand the business, you figured out the culture, you've find some easy wins so you're on the right path. We're talking about relationships. And this, I cannot stress enough, talk to people, talk to business people. What I like to do when I start a new job, and I wish I had more time, but honestly, you have to make time, is just go around and speak to people, go to different teams. At EasyJet, that's amazing because I've spent time in the operations control center, which is the people who 24/7, when there's a delay, try and figure out what's the knock-on effect. You know, one plane's been delayed for 10 minutes. What does that do to the rest of the day's program? If we had to cancel a flight, you know, what do we do with the people? If it's an airport-wide thing, all the planes in Paris have been cancelled, all the flights in Paris have been cancelled, you have to find accommodation for people on that flight. But now, if everything's been cancelled, all the other airlines are also trying to find accommodation. So, you know, it's a really interesting thing just to sit there and listen to them. It's really amazing kind of what they have to do. Also, our planes make us money. So planes fly every single day when there's daylight and a little bit in the darkness, which means when planes need maintenance, when the engineers come on board, they come overnight. So as soon as the curfews, a lot of airports have curfews, you don't fly 24/7, come in, the planes are grounded, and that's when the engineers come, because 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, we need to make money and our planes need to fly. We once worked with a supplier who said they do some testing for us if we can give them a plane for a week. We did burst out laughing. It's just never going to happen, right? It's not going to happen. You need to understand the business. So my suggestion is always to go and meet people. I worked for a company a few years back, which was the Medical Defense Union, which is kind of like, they sell indemnity insurance, although we're not allowed to call it insurance for doctors, but they also have a team of lawyers who deal with medical malpractice suits. So I thought, yeah, I don't know what lawyers do, never met them before, so I'm going to sit there, visit, figure out what do they do. And for the first time in my life, I realized these people are actually dictating letters on a dictaphone and giving those to assistants to type up. Now, I'm not that old, but I grew up with computers. Like my first job, I had a computer. I've never had an assistant type up a letter for me, ever. So, but this was a unique thing for me, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. But had I not taken the time to go and sit down and talk to them, I would never have understood that there's a whole different risk here that I'd not considered. Electronic voice notes on computers, people recording stuff while they're walking on streets. Also, the assistants were covering 4 or 5 different lawyers, so they had ample opportunity to mix up cases very easily. But if I don't go and sit and look at those assistants and figure out what are their processes, how do they work, I can't give them advice to make it more secure, to help them to get the end result of the product. The company was fighting cases in a court of law, you know, because from a security perspective, I probably would have said, we can't have any assistants. But then the business would have said, well, we can't run our business. So yeah, it doesn't work that way. So relationships are really important. Thought I did that. The next thing, and it builds on the relationship issue, is language matters. And I'm going to tell you a story. There's a talk I listened to a couple of years ago from Dr. Jessica Barker. I don't know if everybody ever heard her speak. If you haven't yet, do so. Honestly, I love hearing to her speak. She does kind of all the psychology and security kind of stuff. So the talk she did a couple of years ago was about language. So she put out a question on Twitter. Now, our Twitter followers are more kind of security folks. And she phrased it very academically, very nicely. I can't do it now. But it basically boiled down to, what do you call your profession? Is it information security or is it cybersecurity? And most of the people, you know, in the sort of security sphere said, well, it's information security. Of course it is. You know, it's been information security for 30 years. It's not really changed much. Cyber is just this newfangled little word that people use, and I don't know why. And, you know, I used to be one of those people going, yeah, very self-righteous about it. Then she asked exactly the same question to academic people that she knew through academia, via email or some other forum. And guess what they all came back with? Cyber. Cyber is the word they understand. And this is a very important thing. If you take nothing away from today, I would really urge you to take away this one. If you want to convince someone else of something that you need them to do, use a language that they understand. Not the one that you feel self-righteous about, or that I feel I want to talk to you about what I'm doing. You want to convince them, use a language that they understand. Right, so I think I'm almost done here, so very short, we'll open for questions. This is my last point. So the second thing, if you didn't take away the previous thing, take away this thing. This is honestly the question that I normally ask. Because as I said, when I start a new job, I go around to different teams, I go down to different departments, I sit down with people, and after I ask them to tell me, what do you do? Tell me what you do day to day. I normally ask them this question: how can I help? And you know what happens? Is normally there's silence. Because no one's ever asked them that question. And you'd be surprised at how many doors this actually opens. When you walk in there and you say, "Hi, I'm Maggie. I work in the security function, but really what I want to know today is how can I help you?" Because this comes back to understanding the business, understanding the problems that they face on a day-to-day basis, and then helping them achieve their objectives. Because your objective as a security person is to help the business achieve its objectives in the most secure way possible. And the only way you can do that is by understanding the business, building those relationships, and asking this very key question: how can I help? Thanks.
And I think we have time for some questions.
Sorry, I've broken a remote.
That's fine. That's what stuff from Amazon from China store. Any questions?
I should have mentioned, actually, EasyJet is hiring for loads of positions. If you know people in Luton, by the way, it's in Luton, unfortunately, not up here in Bonnie, Scotland.
Fair. So you can always fly as well. Any questions at all? Question over there. Right.
Hi, Mary. Great presentation. Can you show us your EasyJet walk your weight at night?
Right now, it's a screaming baby. I think I'm going to say suppliers just because that's a big part of my job. EasyJet is one of those companies that things happen, it's probably not unique, but they either happen really slowly, you kind of hear about something and 18 months later it sort of becomes reality, or you hear about something that's going live tomorrow. And because of that, especially in the fast-moving stuff, we use a lot of third parties, either contractors or products or people who just come in to do a quick project. And my team is responsible for supplier assurance, and it's a pain. But it's really important to do because a lot of the breaches that has been mentioned today and that you hear about, there's that supply chain effect. And that's probably the thing we worry about the most. Because also not just one supplier deep, but their supplier and their supplier, and how that all connects. Because, you know, we definitely do supplier assurance one level down. We've sometimes kind of touched on a second level if it's really important, but then you run into all sorts of contractual things, which makes it really hard. But yes, that I would say is probably the thing that's very worrisome.
So, I'm Gary from Skyscanner. We're in similar industries, so I'm assuming that you have quite a global customer basis in terms of internal staff.
Mm-hmm.
So how have you found this when you roll this out globally, or reached out to teams that aren't just down the corridor?
That is a very good question. And actually, this is a whole different talk I've done before on our information security program, really, our Information Champions program. Because you're absolutely right. In understanding the business, this is the thing, right? It's so easy for me because I've always worked in an office. So it's always easy for me to think about people who come into an office, who sit in front of a computer, and what their role is in our day-to-day security. But EasyJet has just over 10,000 employees, only 1,000 of them sit in an office. All of the others are pilots and crew members who, and again, they're the people who actually make money, right? If I don't go to my job for 4 or 5 months, no one's really going to know. But a pilot doesn't turn up and we've got big problems. So yeah, we really have to focus on that. Even when we do our cybersecurity month nowadays, so in November we do the whole month, we do particular presentations and training and quizzes, you know, a whole little awareness thing. But we have to do it at 2 o'clock in the morning in the OCC. If we want to catch the engineers, we have to get airside passes and go and see them at 3 a.m. And if we want the pilots, you've literally got about 2 minutes between when they get coffee and when they're walking to the plane. You literally walk next to them and go, "So I want to talk to you about password security." "Yeah, okay, great, bye." But we have to do all of these things. But our Champions program has been great to help with that because we target people in teams. And again, we ask them that question. We say, how can we help you? you're in that team, you know the best, you know what those people need, you know the risks that they face. Because, you know, the risk that a pilot face is not the same that I face. And the risk that the pilot has towards the company is not the same risk that I pose to the company. So in understanding that, it's getting to talk to people.
Another question in there?
Andrew, I work for a bank in the same city as yourself, technical stuff. I was just wondering if you'd ever seen any adoption from the kind of flight engineering, you know, the kind of the titanium rivets and the life cycle and all that kind of jazz, actually be adopted in your own space and security? You know, the kind of life cycle of
Yeah.
or anything that's aviation.
I think the short answer is going to be no, purely because in our team, when we started the cyber team, we got a clear mandate to go focus on this stuff, the engineer is going to focus on the other stuff. But as the whole world is getting more connected, airplanes are getting more connected as well. So airplanes, even 5 years ago, were completely air-gapped. It was just an airplane system. And if you've read stories about people hacking into airplanes, they haven't. Honestly, they haven't. It was impossible to do. Because the airplane, the operational systems, and maybe I should preface this because I'm not an expert in this, I'm just really interested, because I was going to say, I've been involved in it because I've talked to people, but it's not actually my job. But things are getting more connected now. You know, airplanes are coming out with, when they're in the air, they can send data messages to operational centers and so on. And of course, the more things get connected, the more vulnerabilities is exposed. Your footprint just gets wider. So it's getting more and more interesting. That's definitely a field. If anybody wanted to go into that field, it's completely separate. It's quite niche. But no, my team hasn't actually touched, you know, it's not our responsibility. We've kind of touched on that on the sidelines.
It's the same in the maritime industry, actually. The same set of risks, the same set of vulnerabilities.
Yeah, Ian's just said it's the same in the maritime industry. But that's, as you said, is because people love data. What's the word you'd use? Data lakes, right? But you can only have that, and the data is useful when it's real time. And to make it real time, you have to have them connected. And when you connect stuff, is when they become vulnerable.
Any other questions? Going once? Going twice? Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Product Forge. Thank you. We can probably call it data. Thank you very much. There's still time for Q&A for any of our speakers, or any Q&A just in general.
I've got a question.
Of course.
Can I get another beer?
Yeah, also for questions for either Stu or I, obviously, you know, this rebrand, this merge and all that. We've had a couple of people ask quite poignant questions around